The opening of the aria L'agitata e l'alma mia from Handel's cantata da camera Mi palpita il cor. The singer was the countertenor Philippe Jaroussky, who also directed his ensemble Artaserse on a brand new Erato album called Gelosia. I'm James Jolly and welcome to this Gramophone Podcast. A few weeks ago I caught up with Philippe Jaroussky to talk about Gelosia, but something else too. We're going to talk about Gelosia, your new album, but also 25 years of recording, which is really amazing.
Oh, yes. I've been very lucky. Probably during these 25 years, I didn't count how many albums, how many contributions to albums of other artists, but it's quite a lot. I've been lucky also to start my career at a period where we could still sell a lot of albums and CDs. And what I would say, I've been very happy because I could record everything I wanted to record. Then sometimes even some quite risky repertoire, I would say like the French songs. I did 2 albums on that, Green and Opium, I remember. And also unknown repertoire. It's what I prefer to do, of course, to discover new arias, new repertoire to the audience.
And there are a few surprising things, like, you singing the soprano solo in the Fauré Requiem, for example.
Yes, that was one of the most risky thing. I remember when I did it was a bit complicated, was not an easy recording, but Pavoyavi was fantastic with me, very supportive. And finally, I think this album has more than 10 years. I'm quite proud to be still the first countertenor to have recorded it. I'm convinced that now, in the new generation of countertenors, there are more singers that could record this Piezu, this beautiful piece. But I think it's finally, I'm happier now when I listen to it, because I think it's like a child voice with the maturity of an adult. And I think quite a nice color for this piece.
Looking back over your catalogue, I was going to ask you, because in England we have this countertenor tradition, starting with Alfred Deller and going through people like James Bowman.
Oh, I listen to a lot of British countertenors, of course, Alfred Deller. And I met James Bowman, and it was the one of the most lovely meetings I ever had, because he was incredible. And I remember it was during the Fall Journée in Nantes, and he was performing with Kenneth Weiss. And Kenny introduced me to him, and James said, "Oh my God, Philippe, you on stage to listen to me." He was scared that I was listening to his performance. It was so sweet. And he said something very nice about me. He said that I'm probably the child that Bach would love to hear singing. And I think it's quite a nice compliment. I think if someone say, "Oh, I don't know very much James Bowman," I played the beautiful aria from The Choice of Hercules, because I think it's the heart of James. You recognize him after 2 notes. You cannot imitate him. It's
But you've got a voice that anyone would recognize very, very quickly.
Maybe. I think it's true that I would say I have a very particular color, and sometimes when you get a voice, you wish you could get another voice. And it's true that during years and years, I was fighting, because I was thinking that my voice was too clear, too high. And I'm still fighting to get more low harmonics in my voice, to get a better alto register. But finally, you don't have to fight too much. You have also to accept this color and play with it. And it's true that finally, of course, my voice changed quite a bit during these last 20 years. But this color, I think this is my identity, as you said, and I think I have to keep it, because this particular color is allowing me to interpret what I sing in a specific way also. If I try to get another voice, I will lose myself also.
Have you sung any of the sort of works, say, that Britain wrote for?
No, never,
Canticle.
because I think it's still too low for me.
Oh right, okay.
Yes, maybe Apollo I could do it because it's just one scene, I think. A big one scene.
It's not very much.
But unfortunately, Oberon is really too low for me. And in my academy, I teach a lot this beautiful I know a bank and to some singers. And I'm always thinking, I could sing that, but the entire part is not for me, for sure.
So let's talk about your new album, Gelosia. So this is Cantatas da Camera.
Yes, for once the title was easy to find because inside this album we have two first recordings cantatas, the one of Porpora and the one of Galuppi, with this title, La Gelosia, based
with the same libretto, isn't it?
With the same libretto from Metastasio, the master of the drama and musica in the 18th century. And I thought it was quite interesting also to make this title because, of course, a lot of cantatas, chamber cantatas of this period is about a desperate lover. And of course, maybe not all the cantatas of the album are talking only about the jealousy, but mainly about this idea of this desperate lover. And I really wanted to make an album of chamber cantatas because I think we were doing more albums of this repertoire like 25 years ago. I'm thinking about the great Gerard Lane, for example. We did amazing CDs on this repertoire. But these last 20 years, I would say that we all, me also, we were dedicating ourselves more to the repertoire of the Baroque opera, probably because a lot of traditional classical singers had more and more interest on Baroque. Then, of course, I'm thinking to Cecilia Bartoli, Joyce Di Donato. And then, of course, we had to rediscover a lot of amazing Baroque operas. But I always, from the very beginning, was very attracted by these chamber cantatas because I always thought that was a repertoire where composers were trying new ideas and in a more intimate way. If it was working in the cantata, they could put it later in operas.
Because they're rather like a little chunk of opera sort of lifted out, aren't they? Because they're mostly sort of recitative aria,
Yes.
And then possibly another couple, but not always.
Yes, and sometimes I did a lot of recitals with opera arias, of course, but sometimes you jump to one story to another, then you do a quick aria, which is full of coloraturas, and suddenly you sing a very sad aria from another opera. It's a nice exercise, but I think, yes, to sing these cantatas who are mainly between 10 and 20 minutes, it's a different pleasure. Then you can really tell the story from the beginning to the end as thought the composer and the librettist. Of course, sometimes it can be a bit less dramatic than an opera, but sometimes not. I'm thinking about the Vivaldi one, which is, of course, a masterpiece.
What's interesting about the recordings, you've got 5 cantatas on it.
Yes.
They're all very distinctive sound worlds.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't necessarily say, oh, that's Galuppi or that's Porpora, but you can certainly say that's a very different composer.
Yes, and I think in this album we are starting with the very beginning of the 18th century with Scarlatti, with this so very specific style. I think Alessandro Scarlatti is one of my favorite composers. I think it's more than 400 or 500 cantatas he composed. It's boundless. Now you can really find and rediscover so many cantatas. There is so many cantatas to rediscover in libraries. No, you can do it yourself at home on internet. That's fantastic. And of course, this Ombretta Cite, for example, this is really one of the pieces I wanted to record for more than 20 years. I think this is absolutely stunning. It's one of the best cantatas he wrote, with so many spicy harmonies, crazy ideas, and this is the best of Alessandro Scarlatti. But it's a different style. It's really the beginning of the 18th century, and we finished this album with the Galuppi's cantata, La Gelosia, which is honestly from 1780, I think, around. And it's really already classical music, I would say, with very elegant style, a totally different way to write for the voice. And then I think, yes, in this album you have also 70 years of music, but we can see the evolution of the style during all this 18th century.
It may be sacrilegious to say this, but when you get to the Handel,
Yeah.
you just think, oh my God, we're in the presence of somebody on a slightly different level. To me, you just think, even within a few notes, you think, gosh, there's something extraordinary happening here.
It's fascinating to think that Handel was so young when he wrote it. He wrote it he was, I think, 17, 18 years old. And it's really the product of his trip in Italy. There is something magical in this period for Handel. I think he was really shocked and so inspired by all the music he heard, probably from Scarlatti himself, but from Caldara, from Corelli, from a lot of composers. And what is fascinating with Handel is just taking the best ideas and writing better, composing better after. This is pure genius. But he was like a sponge when he was young and trying to find the best ideas. And it's true that even the first notes of this Mi palpita il cor, when he's imitating the heart beating, this is something close from contemporary music, even we could say. That's what I was telling from the beginning, that really these cantatas are really laboratories to try new things, to allow the composer to really take risks. I think mostly they were taking less risk in opera world because they really had to please to a big audience, and they couldn't do too complicated or too intellectual musics. And knowing the cantata, they could do it, really.
I think when you listen to the Handel, you kind of know that in the future there's going to be some amazing.
I think you like the Handel one.
I love the whole record actually, but it was just extraordinary. It was just you suddenly thought, wow, we're in the presence of somebody just kind of a bit special here.
Yes, and actually I remember I sang this cantata in London, I think 20 years ago already. And Serge Saïta, the flutist, is amazing. He's one of the best Baroque flutists. He played a lot for Mark Minkowski, for William Christie. And we played this cantata together 20 years ago. And for me, I had to record this piece with him, absolutely.
I mean, it's a sensational flute part, isn't it?
Yes, and it's so sensual also. The first aria, how the voice and the flute are blending, and the dialogue is amazing and very sensual. Yes, I would say that also the Vivaldi one is a real masterpiece, and probably
it's probably the best known of cantata on the record.
Yes, definitively. And I dedicated 3 entire albums to Vivaldi. I would say that I always said in interviews that Vivaldi has been my best impresario and manager for these last 20 years. I've been very lucky. I started my career when we were discovering his operas, for instance, by the Vivaldi edition, of course. I recorded 4 operas in this edition. I arrived just after the Vivaldi album from Cecilia Bartoli, who was a huge shock. I think it's definitively an historical recording.
It was almost like sort of, all of a sudden, this composer exploded onto the scene. All we knew was the 4 seasons and maybe a couple of other sets of concertos and possibly 1 or 2 choral works. And then all of a sudden, it was like, my God, there's hundreds of pieces more vocal music.
We really discovered that he had genius for voice also. And this cantata, Cessate o mai cessate, was already quite often played before this revolution of opera, with the Nisi Dominus, with the Stabat Mater, for instance. But it is really maybe the closest work to opera in this album. It's difficult to explain why, but it's definitely a Venetian music. Particularly the first aria, you feel that you are in the lagoon in Venice.
It's just a sensational aria.
Yeah.
I mean, that accompaniment is just so beautiful and limpid, and you can kind of see the light twinkling. And
yes, and the first aria is very similar to two arias I sang a lot, like Vedrò col mio diletto or Sento in seno. You know, this ostinato on the strings and these beautiful melodic waves on the voice. And this is typical. And then there is something magical in Vivaldi, because honestly, if you look at the way he's writing, it's quite simple and pure, but there is something just going out of his music which is quite magical. He can hypnotize you in just few seconds. And of course, the part of the orchestral part is fantastic. From the very beginning already, you have these first few bars, he's changing rhythm and writing at the orchestra to already show how tormented is the protagonist of this cantata. This is insane. And he's cutting the beginning of an allegro with this cessate, which like just stop, which is so smart and so, this is just pure genius as Handel. For Porpora, I would say the pleasure is different. Porpora, he was a master for recitativo accompagnato, that we can feel in this cantata La Gelosia, because it's so well written with the text. On the arias, of course, we are not at the level of Handel, you're very right to say that, but there is a great pleasure for singers to sing Porpora, because we know that he was a great master to teach to singers. He teach to Farinelli, but honestly, I think he knew that he was not such a great composer. But of course, there are beautiful arias. The most famous one is Alto Giove, of course, composed for Farinelli. But he knew that even when he was in London, in the theater who was fighting with Handel, he brought to his own theater an opera by Handel, which proves that he knew it. And I think he was also a great fan of Handel Porpora for sure.
Talking to you sound like you're really interested in the historical background to this music, you know, the people who were around, the people who knew each other, you know, the journeys they made. Is that a sort of fascination for you?
It's kind of fascination. It's true that this particular period, I would say in London, around 1735, when Handel is there in London against Porpora, this is fascinating for me, because Handel created some of his best operas. He created Ariodante and Alcina in this year, and probably he wouldn't write these two masterpieces if he didn't have to fight Porpora. Then it proves that there's this emulation that really brought Handel at his highest level, like Giulio Cesare before. He needed Porpora to write better operas even. Then I think this is quite fascinating, and I had a lot of interest at the beginning of my career for Carestini, this great castrato, who was one of the biggest rival of Farinelli, and it's fascinating, they really hated each other so much. It was at the beginning they were singing in the same opera when they were young, but after it wasn't possible anymore because they really hated each other. Then, yes, particularly when as a countertenor, I sang a lot of castrato repertory, and you cannot sing the castrato repertory if you don't have a real interest about their stories, make researches, and I think what is interesting, for example, to collect music composed for a particular castrato, is that more you have the music he sang in his life, more you can imagine the characteristic of his voice. And then you can work in this direction.
Presumably, you could also see that composers were writing for the particular qualities that singer could bring. So they knew that, you know, they knew he had a strong, you know, very strong sort of tessitura in a certain area or stuff like that, or could, you know, rapid.
Yes, and it's fascinating to see that sometimes, even if the composer is changing, the castrato has a particular way to do some coloraturas, and you can find almost the same coloraturas in different composers, which means that they were really at the service of the singer, and they were using his abilities the most. And then it's quite unusual. For example, in Ariodante, you have an entire coloratura which is taken from Artaserse by Leonardo Vinci. It just took it from an aria from Vinci that Carestini created a few years before. And then you discover that, and it's fascinating.
Can you imagine nowadays the court case that would be?
Exactly. And what is fascinating with Handel that he was sometimes taking ideas from others, but he was always changing something, transforming. I would say sometimes, some people they say if you could meet someone of the past, I think it wouldn't be Handel anyway, even if I have a great admiration for him because I think he has a really bad character. I would be too impressed to sing in front of him and then he will tell me that I'm singing his music like shit. I wouldn't take
So who would you
risk.
like to meet instead?
A good question. That would be maybe a surprise for you, but the composer I would love to meet is Maurice Ravel for sure. I'm a huge fan of Maurice Ravel and I love all his music. Yes, that probably will be him.
It was interesting when I played this album without reading the booklet very much.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised when I saw that it was just 6 players.
Yes.
You're thinking, gosh, that sounds like quite a lot of people. And then I looked and there was a photograph of you surrounded by your orchestra.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a tiny little group.
Yeah,
but they make a fabulous sound.
Yeah, and that's the miracle of recordings, we would say. That was also an album I really wanted to do for my musicians of Artaserse, for the first violin, the first second violin, the first viola player, the first cello. For me, it was also very important to bring this first team of Artaserse and make them work together even more. And of course, when you are just one musician making one part, he has more freedom, of course, than an orchestra. Then, of course, the process is quicker.
And presumably your role is less of conductor. You're kind of there as just another musician amongst them making
Exactly, I
changes.
can give directions about nuances, some piano, some crescendi, but I let more space for the musicians for sure. Most of these musicians, I know them for almost 20 years. The harpsichordist Yoko Nakamura, I met her when I was 19 years old. Yes, it's a way to be closer from my musicians, just to play music just at 6, 7, and really to defend this repertoire, I would say, because it's not so often done now on concerts. And of course, the goal of the album is to do it in concerts.
It seems like repertoire absolutely made for a
Yes,
concert.
yes, of course. Probably most of them were created for a small audience, for sure. But the goal of these cantatas was also to please maybe someone who could support the composer in the future, a patron, something like this. Then it was also a laboratory, but in a way also a way to charm.
Fundraising.
Yes, it's a fundraising repertoire, I would say also.
So if you do them in concert, would you put an orchestral piece or a chamber piece
Yes,
between
exactly.
the cantatas?
Yeah, we will have some sonatas, some ouvertures. Yeah, we bring something, but mainly we will keep, I would say, approximately the order. We start with Scarlatti and we will finish with Galuppi.
So tell me about your journey with Artaserse. I mean, the name.
Yes.
Where did you get the name from? Because it could come from a number of places.
Alors, this name comes from my passion for the castrato Carestini, and he created this beautiful opera Artaserse by Leonardo Vinci, who was one of the most famous opera of this century. It was very important opera for the specific Napolitan style, and I was a bit obsessed by that. And then I decided to name my new ensemble Artaserse. Even 10, 15 years before I was recording this Artaserse by Vinci with some of my great colleagues like Franco Fagioli, Max-Emmanuel Cencic, Valer Barna-Savadus. And the idea of creating an ensemble was very early because I had this clear voice who was not very high soprano, not alto, and I realized quite young that I needed to find my own repertoire and just bring some musicians around me and do it myself. That was the base of Artaserse. And it started with few musicians. I dedicated my first album to Benedetto Ferrari. And after I did this chamber cantatas for just alto and continuo from Vivaldi. And little by little, it was growing. And I would say that more and more, the idea also from the very beginning was to conduct in the future. I'm starting to conduct this for a few years now. And people sometimes are surprised because they are thinking it's a new idea, but it was really deep on me from the very beginning. I always was imagining myself on the pit, conducting. And of course, I waited for having more experiences to be more sure about the ideas I wanted to bring. And I have to say that this new place on the pit is probably on the future the place where I will be more and more. I hope so. And curiously, I'm not frustrated not to sing. When I am at this place and then I have to help the singers who are on stage to be finally in front of my musicians also. This is also one of the greatest pleasure as a conductor, that you can finally face your musicians and have a direct dialogue with them. This is probably, I would say, my new addiction. And I think conducting is a drug, really. It's serious
It's
because
a dangerous drug.
it's
in the wrong hands, shall we say?
Yes, because first you can imagine you're a genius quite quickly. Then you have to take a distance because, of course, when the first time you are conducting and then you finally feel that the sound is changing because of your gesture or because of what you give, this is such a great pleasure. I can understand perfectly, for example, Nathalie Stutzmann or Barbara Hannigan. I think they probably feel the same thing. And I have to say that I really like the idea there are more and more singers conducting. I don't want to say that you need to be a singer to conduct an opera, but it's kind of a different approach. And I think it's a new generation, and I think it's quite good that we are here. And then we give something different in a way of supporting the singers, listening to them. And I remember a friend of mine came to listen my Mithridate I conduct in Montpellier for Mozart. At the end he said, "It's very good, Philippe, but don't follow too much the singers." And I think maybe for the moment I want to be at the service of the singers. And of course, you need as a conductor to find this right balance between keeping the tension, keeping the rhythm, be with the stage. And for the moment, maybe I'm too much with the stage. No, I have to bring more tension in my way to conduct, be more efficient. And this is very, very exciting for me. And I can not say that I will have the same career as a conductor that as a singer, but this is a place where I really feel good.
There's definitely a quality that a singer-conductor brings to the music making. It's quite difficult to put your finger on it, but it's something to do with the phrasing and the breathing, and
Yes.
even if it's just a pure orchestral, when Natalie, when she conducts, it does feel different.
Yes, exactly. Maybe I won't have the same career of her because I think her from the very beginning, her dream was to conduct Wagner, Beethoven, Bruckner, Mahler.
She also made the decision to conduct while she was still in very good voice, because I remember talking to her and she said, "Look, I absolutely don't want people saying, oh, I started conducting because I could no longer sing."
But sometimes it's difficult. I have the same trouble now. Some journalists ask me if I was still singing, and I say yes. And of course, we like to put people in one case. But I'm 48 now, and the voice of a countertenor, you never know. I think it's already fantastic if I can get 30 years, 35 years of career. I would be very happy with. And I think if I have more and more opportunities and pleasure to conduct, the transition will be very easy, of course. But I won't be like Natalie. I would say that one of my biggest dream and my new love, I would say, is Mozart. That's why I decided to start with the very beginning, conducting Mithridate. We could say it's still, in a sense, a Baroque opera. Of course, much better than the operas of his time. Or honestly, this is insane what he wrote at the age of 14 years old.
It is a huge opera as well.
It's huge and it's very virtuosic for the voices, but it's still Baroque. But I would say one of my biggest dreams, because it's nice and I have a new job, then I have new dreams. And my biggest dream would be to conduct Don Giovanni. But I would say not before 10 years. And I would like to, really conduct Mozart in a very chronologic way. I would say after Mithridat, I would love to conduct Idomeneo and really go in this direction until this Don Giovanni.
Well, René Jacobs has led the way, hasn't he? Because he
Yeah,
started
and
as a
he was a
countertenor,
singer,
and now, of course, he's done all the Mozart.
Yeah, and he's a singer also. Say it's close to my nature as a singer also. I think I'm not a type of conductor for Beethoven, for example, maybe Schubert, but I don't see myself conduct an opera of Beethoven, but maybe Schubert. Let's say not only Mozart. We shouldn't limit it to Mozart, but also I would say I have this past as a violinist, as a pianist, and I have my academy also when I'm teaching to young singers, but close to modern musicians like Nemanja Radulovic, Cédric Tiberghien, and Anne Gastinel. And that's probably why also I was singing the French songs. And with Jérôme Ducrot, we are playing together for more than 15 years. We also dedicated an album to Schubert. It's probably one of the albums I worked the most on it. And that was a great journey, I would say, this Schubert album. And I like to be close from modern musicians, not only Baroque musicians. For me, this is very important. And I have a great pleasure to sing with piano also. This is totally a different world, of course. But I probably would love to make before to stop to sing a last album dedicated to French songs too. Because there is a lot of unknown pieces also in the let's say end of 19th century and beginning of 20th century. It's like Baroque music. There is so many songs. We need to rediscover that. I would love to make an album with just forgotten French songs. And it's fantastic when you are rediscovering a piece and then over-interpret after playing or singing it. That this is a great gift too. I think it's not because you are rediscovering a piece that you have to be the owner of this piece. This piece has also to travel until the next generation of artists, for instance.
Che infelice sempre mi vuol dori la ingrata, ma sempre più spietata, ma sempre più spietata, ma
Part of Vivaldi's cantata Cessate o mai cessate, sung by our guest this week, Philippe Jaroussky, who also directed Artaserse. And his new Erato album, Gelosia, is just out. Gramophone podcasts are free, so if you enjoy them, then a really great way to support our work is to take out a subscription to Gramophone Magazine. Over 13 issues a year, we bring you hundreds of reviews by our expert critics, as well as in-depth articles about the latest classical music releases and the most exciting musicians of the day. And if you head over to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and enter the code podcast20 in the checkout, you can even get a 20% discount off any subscription package. We really value your support, and consider leaving a review or rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And do look out for another Gramophone podcast very soon.